It's a pleasure to be the host for Dr. Thiaga Rajan. Being very far from politics, there are very few names that I get to hear. And these are extraordinary names. And when I first heard of Dr. Thiaga Rajan as a minister, I went and read up then itself. And I was very, very pleased that Indian politics is able to interest people of your caliber.
Thank you.
And thanks for this opportunity because I got to double dip and go deeper and understand your thoughts, your ideas for the country, for the state, and in general about the society. Firstly, I want to, many of you probably already know this, I want to say that Mr. Thiaga Rajan's life sounds very, very familiar to many people here, many of the audiences from corporates, startups, and the IT industry. So Dr. Thiaga Rajan, like many of our friends, went to NIT Trichy. From there, he went to do masters in operations. Then he did a PhD. Then after that, studied business at MIT Sloan. All this sounds like very, very familiar, like a friend. And he fell in love there and married the person he fell in love with, transcending the barriers of religion, caste, whatnot, right? The country, nationality, and etc. And then had a fantastic corporate career. Became a managing director at Standard Chartered Bank. Had a really, really fantastic, typical kind of IT-based background, this thing. But then the familiarity ends there, right? After being the managing director at Standard Chartered Bank, he came back to serve the nation as a politician. So I was very curious to know, what drove you to come back and contribute and think of contributing to the country? And what did you have in your mind when you took that decision?
Thank you for that very kind introduction. Let me start by first saying, I also deem it a privilege to be in conversation with you. I read up a bit about you. I think the ability to find a technology, a platform that is used by millions of people and improves the efficiency of the system overall is an amazing achievement. So congratulations on that. I think you're a visionary and example for many to follow. In my case, I think it was my ancestors calling to me. My father was in public life, my grandfather was in public life, my great-grandfather was one of the founders of the Justice Party back in the 1900s. So I think I'm an only child, and I think it was always expected that at some point I would come to serve the public. I tried to put it off as long as I could and see the world and do things and become independent. And then at the age of 50, I finally came back.
Yeah, that's a great advantage. I think you can bring this global perspective and the corporate perspective.
Yeah, I think the bigger advantage is that unless you have this kind of legacy, nobody's giving you a seat at the age of 50. Most people in public life start right at the bottom. And so I always joke that if it wasn't for my father, I wouldn't have wanted to come, and if it wasn't for my father, I couldn't have come. So it was a self-fulfilling equilibrium there.
Yeah, very nice, yeah. And but you're very different from other politicians. What I heard is you won elections without spending money. That's phenomenal because it has large implications. I know very few politicians, but what I understand, I know very few politicians personally, but what I understand from them is, given a choice, right, they don't want to buy a vote because it's increasingly becoming a burden, right? It's become now earning money. Money's become a need rather than a want. You have to have money to be a politician. But you're very different. Like, I heard you win elections without spending money. How is that? I mean, what is the recipe?
No, I mean, no, I think, listen, we all spend money. The Election Commission fixes a ceiling. We spend within that ceiling. We have to do some advertising, some campaigning, some going around. But actually, those costs are relatively manageable. It's like, a few lakhs of rupees for an MLA seat. But I think the difference is, at the core of it, you have to decide what kind of relationship you want with the people early on in your career. And the people will take you on that agreement or that kind of faith, in my experience, continuously. So the first time I came, I was a rarity. I was advised that I had to, pay. I was told that my opponent was doing it, that others were doing it. And I just said, I came for a different reason. I came to serve. And so that day was the key decision point, right? In the earlier conversation, I was saying that sometimes when you make a decision, you don't understand the second order, third order, 10-year, 20-year implications of these decisions. But for me, it was more instinctive. I said, I came here to serve like my forefathers. I didn't come here to make a living. I don't need to win that badly. I came here to, satisfy my conscience, fulfill my obligations to my forefathers that I thought was the right thing to do. If the people don't want me, I can live with that. I'm not. So I had that great luxury that winning was not that essential to my life. And so I chose to take the risk. But the good news I want to say is that if you make that kind of compact with the people and you continuously deliver, then I think over time it becomes the norm and other people start asking the question, can I also do the same thing? So, in my limited understanding of Tamil Nadu politics, this culture of money and elections was not prevalent before like the mid-2000s. I know my father stood in elections before that. I've seen, though I lived in the US, I used to come back to help him. It became more prevalent after mid-2000s or so, after my father passed actually, because in his last election in 2006, which he won, we certainly didn't spend any money. But somehow it became prevalent and I came 10 years later. By then, in 10 years, it had become relatively widely spread. So I thought this is my chance to test if it's like a breakable or unbreakable phenomenon. And just to give you the statistics, in my constituency, the two elections before I ran, my party had lost it by 13% and 16%. And of course, every election is different, but at some other level, the voters are roughly the same. So you can't read too much into the data in a time series, but there's some value. But I went from -13, -16% in 2011 and 14, MP and MLA together, I'm saying. 2016, I scraped through, plus 4% or something like that. By 2019, not only did we do well, but we did better than the state average for my coalition, or roughly the same as state average, and better than any of the other 9 MLA districts in my constituency. By 2021, I was like 16 points or 17 points better than the state average, and by far the number one in my district. So it went from plus 5 or 6% to plus 19% to plus 24%. So we've just been moving that way, including this recently concluded election. So now we have reached a level of understanding with the people. This is what I deliver, and this is what faith they put in me. Because, for example, one thing I do, which is relatively rare, every 6 months I publish a report. And it's becoming increasingly big, maybe like 18 to 20 pages. What have I done for you in the last 6 months?
Wow.
Like what, as an MLA, what have I done? As a minister, what have I done? And I print, of course I publish it online, but I also print 50,000 copies and deliver them with serial number. I deliver them door to door at every house.
Wow.
So, that's you build that relationship with the people, then you can get elected again and again, I think, without paying. Yeah.
Wow. So a lot of corporate thoughts are helping here in politics, which is great news. I mean, if only other constituencies could come on this path, this can significantly change the country's course.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, of course, most people don't vote rationally most of the time. But if you really think about it, it makes no sense that somebody should vote for even, let's say, 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees for a 5-year period. I mean, the per capita income in Tamil Nadu is like 3 lakh rupees. So if you say even that the median is half the mean, 1.5 lakh rupees, and then you say 3-4 member family, you do all the math. The average household is probably earning 40,000-50,000 rupees a month, the household, or maybe 30,000. And the median is probably 20,000 rupees a month. Once in 5 years, 500 or 1,000 cannot change their lives that much that they should sacrifice their future. You know what I mean? In fact, I'll go that one step further. Even in the election where, to my understanding, my opponent paid, and I didn't, the first election, the highest margin of victory for me was in the poorest and the Dalit colonies, where actually the money had the least effect for the opponent. So most people are at least smart enough to understand what is in their interest in the bigger picture. And I remember, and this just, like in a era when everything about politics is negative, I just want to give this one positive anecdote. The day of polling was a rainy day and it was all slushy, and most of these booths are inside school compounds, so you have to walk through the play fields and all that. And I was going to inspect the booth to see if polling was going okay. The booths were over there. There's just puddles all the way from here to there, so it's like navigating like a, Frogger or something game. You have to keep finding the things to go. So I'm walking and I see a young girl carrying a baby coming on the other side. So I start moving in a way that I think I'm going to avoid her so that she doesn't have to step in the water, but I also don't have to. And then I keep my head down and I'm walking, and suddenly I realize she's closer to me than when I started. Then it occurred to me, I'm trying to avoid her, she's actually trying to talk to me. So I just stood there and waited for her to come. First election. I can't even speak Tamil publicly at that time. I go for 1 month of campaign without opening my mouth. I just go to every place. I don't speak. This is the day of polling. I stand there. She comes up to me. She says, "Aren't you the candidate? I know you." She says, "I've just come from the booth. I voted for you. You're going to win. Do something good for the people."
Wow.
Right? She's like young Dalit girl with a little baby. Right? Like, and that much, so that really gave me hope that, this is the most important thing I've done in my life. I was a successful banker, I was a successful consultant and all that. But it was for companies and shareholders. It was not for people.
The people.
And so at least in that particular colony, I've made it my mission over the last 8 years. I relaid the roads, I put in new water pipelines, I removed all the electrical wires from the top because of the risk of fire. I put it underneath, I built Anganwadis, I built community hall. I've done everything possible I can in 8 years in that constituency to improve their way of life. Yeah.
And the same thing is probably possible for every politician. Then what is stopping them? Is it the will or the...
I don't know. I think there's the whole negative aspect, right? And again, it starts with this core of faith. I believe that most people are sophisticated enough thinkers. I believe that if you're a human being who's alive today, irrespective of your education level, irrespective of your economic level, you have an innate biological intelligence, like, through the process of evolution of human beings, that you can tell who is who and what is what. And so since I have faith in humanity, I trust in them and I hope they trust in me. A lot of people, that trust has been broken. Maybe, it takes a couple of losses, I don't know what it is. A lot of politicians think that the people are fickle. Let me also trade at that level of fickleness that I can buy and sell. Right? So I think at the core of it, it requires you to have really a faith in the nature of human beings to do it this way. In some sense, this is a much harder way.
Yeah.
Because if you could guarantee me that by paying I'd win, I'd say the workload will be a lot less. Right? I mean, morally, I have a different problem with it. But just, efficiency-wise, if there was a way to pay and win without having to do all this work, then I suppose for some people that might be the easier way out anyway. Because doing this work is tough. It requires some thinking. It requires a bit of professionalism. You got to run databases. You got to have call centers. be connected to the people, you have to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps you could start an institution to educate for the better of the country, to educate others to go your way of doing it.
No, I think the world is going that way. I think more and more young people are coming. I think more and more advisory firms are coming, at least now for the campaigning part. But much more is needed for the serving part. I think you're right. I think we need to do more of that. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks. So now I want to move towards the context of this conversation, which is the Dakshin Dialogue. I understand that you are the first one. You have inaugurated this conference a couple of years ago. Which means you're very connected to this concept of having a Dakshin dialogue. So wanted to hear your thoughts on why you feel it is important for a forum like this to exist. Why should we have a conversation around South first?
No, I think Mr. Reddy was very clear about the need for collaboration and the need for collaboration within the South as an example. But I'll even maybe step a little back. One of the things that worries me a lot is that because of the population being heavily centered in the north, and because the seat of power is in the north, and because people who effectively win UP and the Hindi belt, where, there's 250 MP seats out of 540, most likely form the government. So the perception of the country is in some ways north-centric because power comes from the north and governance comes from the north. So in that sense, when Vasu first came to me, before he started this, he came and we had a conversation in Chennai, and he said, I want to start showing that the South also has its kind of features and characteristics and some commonalities and some issues. So I said that makes a lot of sense because the identity of India is very much a northern identity in many ways, and the fact that the southern identity is a bit hidden and it's a bit different. So I think that's one thing. The second thing I would say is that I said this in the GST Council when I was a member, the need for state-to-state dialogue has never been higher. Right? Like we are all operating in a highly centralized kind of an increasingly concentration of power in Delhi model, which is the opposite of any developed country in the world. Like most countries start out relatively distributed power and devolution, and increasingly so as time goes on. Take the UK. They've created parliaments in Wales and Scotland because they wanted devolution of power closer to the people, right? And most countries, you take China, you take America, you take capitalist, communist, anybody, the level of delegation to local bodies, to states, to regions is very high. Compared to India, for whatever reason, when the constitution was written, they were worried they were creating a country out of nothing. 2-3 millennia of civilized, settled land, first time creating one republic. They put a lot of the power in the center, overwhelming amount of it, so that it would be more likely to hold together. And therefore, it was already a highly concentrated in center power. And then whenever we had single party rule, the Congress from the 1950s till the 1980s, and then the last 10 years of the BJP rule, every time there's been single party rule, they've tried to increase the control in the center at the risk of the states or at the expense of the states. So in this context, it makes a lot of sense that states should have a lot of dialogue between themselves, and there is no forum. In fact, the GST Council ends up being a forum where a lot of both states issues and state-union relationship issues get discussed, though that's not the intent of what the council is for, but because there's no other body, practically, these issues come up. So in that sense, I think we need a lot of state-to-state dialogue broadly across all states, and in particular the southern states, because we have a lot in common. You know, our cultures are a bit common, our languages all derive from the same place, our outcomes in education, in technology, in economic development are relatively similar. So we have a lot to talk about and a lot to share and learn from each other and work together. So I think for both those reasons, I think this is a good initiative.
Very nice to hear that. Actually, to learn that the states do not have any other forum to come together, discuss, and etc. So this is a great initiative that way.
I mean, it's happening bit by bit, right? You saw recently there was a conclave of all the finance ministers of India. Most were invited, but it was mostly the southern states that went in Kerala. Back in February, March, during the parliamentary campaign, the state of Karnataka held a protest against the center's fiscal kind of, stepmotherly treatment. And then the state of Kerala held, and I went and participated along with other states at my chief minister's instruction. So states are increasingly coming together, but it's usually after the damage has been done. Something outrageous has happened and now we're gathering to protest. Or something very extreme is in the offing, like the 16th Finance Commission is likely to even further deprive us. So now the finance ministers get together. We need to do it more often, more proactively, more regularly, rather than just because an issue comes up, I think.
So what could be the challenges if more and more power is given to the states? And by that extrapolation, let's say you also spoke about the city mayor having their own police and their own policies, their own taxation, etc. Right? I mean, as the member of the government of Tamil Nadu, I mean, if you extrapolate it, and do you, I mean, can you imagine giving that power to your city mayors and to the panchayats, having their own police force and etc.? What problems do you foresee there? And I mean, does it feel different from the center giving power to the states, or is it similar?
There's I think the former director of the NIPFP who said everybody wants devolution till their level of government, right? And the classic example is our Prime Minister, who was the biggest champion of states' rights, who railed against the center every day of his tenure as chief minister, and then went and sat in the prime minister's seat and took all the power away from the states.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that is human nature. But if you transcend that, then you have to say the principle stays the same. The principle is devolve the revenue generation and the spending and the design and implementation of programs as close to the people as possible. The default should be as close to the people as possible. Then if you have a reason why it should be taken up to a different level for standardization, for homogenization, for accountability, then you should take it up one from there. But most of the world, the principle should be keep it as close to the people. And the reason to keep it as close to the people as is viable or feasible is the ratio and the accountability both work in your favor. By the ratio, I mean, if you keep it very close to the people, for every 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 people, you have an elected representative. By the time you come to a member of parliament, for every 2 million people, you have an elected representative. Completely skewed ratio. And 2 million people are not going to hold anybody accountable for anything. You can't even see the person. Every 1,000 or 2,000 people in the local area who sees the councillor daily or weekly is going to be much more capable of holding them accountable. And in reverse, the conditions are going to vary town to town, city to city, village to city, state to state. I always give these examples, right? If you take like a state like Tamil Nadu and a state like Bihar, these statistics are a few years old. But let's say about 4 or 5 years ago, per capita income in Bihar is like 40,000 rupees. In Tamil Nadu is like 2.5, then 2.6 lakh rupees. Average education in Bihar is elementary school dropout. Average education in Tamil Nadu is high school graduate. Average age in Bihar is 19. Average age in Tamil Nadu is 32. We're already a declining population. So how do you define policies or schemes that are equally applicable to both these groups? It's almost impossible. Right?
About building global brands from India. And Tamil Nadu also has an ambitious target of 1 trillion economy, $1 trillion GSDP. So what are your thoughts around that? Like, what are the pillars of that? What is the opportunity for us right now, for Tamil Nadu, for India? How do we tap into it?
I don't know, maybe I'll start at the national level, then I'll go to the state level, then I'll try and tie the two together. Right? At the national level, I think the two greatest things we have going for us right now, the demographic dividend Mr. Reddy talked about, right? Like right now, I used to live overseas for 30 years. Now I've been away for a few years. I go back overseas, like this year I've traveled a lot, and I'm shocked. No company anywhere in the world, in any field, is running without Indians in the senior management. Like the Indian diaspora and professionals is just everywhere, right? That's dramatically different from when I was an expat, let's say, in the US. In these 10, 15 years, it's changed. But the reality is roughly 1 in 6 people alive today is Indian. And if you take out the aged population, the aging population, and you factor in today's youth coming into the workforce and all that, for the next generation, for the next 20 years, something like 20 to 25% of the global workforce that is capable of getting into work because they've had basic education, unlike in parts of Africa where they're war-torn and not, getting enough infrastructure, then that's going to be Indian. So by far, the story of the next generation has to be Indian human capital resource. And I think that we have going for us in multiple ways, in terms of bringing work here, in terms of doing work over the wires, like research or R&D or BP or whatever, GCC. Also in terms of just temporary or permanent migration to all these places that are extremely short and their populations are aging, right? Like in Australia and in Japan, in places where they would historically never look to take immigrants. Without immigrants, the economy can't function. So it has to be a capital story. The second is the last 20 or 25 year implicit trade of the whole world was shift all your manufacturing to China, and in return they'll use all their excess profits to fund your government debt, your deficits, right? They built up their foreign exchange reserves to 4.5 trillion or something like that. That trade is unwinding dramatically. China's got a lot of internal problems. They're selling down their foreign reserves. They've got to deal with a lot of things. But a lot of the global corporate community, partly because of COVID, partly because they've understood the risk, concentration risk of keeping everything in China, but also because they're worried that the Chinese companies are becoming so big and so good that they may dominate whole industries and sectors. So for all these reasons, the de-risking of China is happening at an exponential pace. Like, we talked about this Bloomberg story about what is happening in Tamil Nadu. Yes, we're doing a lot of things right. But the macro wave is everybody's getting out of China. And the overwhelming majority of the increase that has happened in our electronics assembly in the last 2-3 years is a function of Apple shifting iPhone production out of China and into Tamil Nadu, effectively, right? So this shift away from China is going to provide a once-in-a-generation macro-seismic opportunity for us if we can seize it in assembly, in manufacturing, in design, in engineering services, in AI, in technology, in everything that people are doing there is going to be looking for a new home. Of course, we have competition. We have in Vietnam and Thailand, most of the competition is in Southeast Asia, also in Eastern Europe, places like that. Now the question is, what are the states doing about it, and what can the center and the states do together? The states are doing, I'd say, some better, some worse. We've had really good outcomes in Tamil Nadu. We're focusing on skilling, we're focusing on infrastructure, we're focusing on relative ease of doing business, and more than ease, speed of doing business, right? Like what China is really known for is that the gap between intent and outcome is very short and very reliable, that you can start and get things done. We need to get to that level where if an investor comes to us and says, I want to do something in a reasonable period of time, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, they should have it up and running. So those are the kinds of things states need to do. I'd say we're doing better than most, but we can do a lot better still. In fact, because the opportunity is so big, I worry that we're not geared up enough to seize this opportunity. The wave is just crashing on us like a tsunami, and we should do a lot more. Then the question is, what should India or the government of India and the government of the states do together? And I think that's really where the biggest weakness is. Right now, the government of India, I say this apolitically, is basically neither taking a lead role in doing all these marketings, they announce some policies and stuff, or when actual investments come, they're directing them to their favored states, right? 1 or maybe 2. And there is no coordination between, like if we get called, like I get called all the time to speak at international conferences. I have to get approval from the government of India before I can travel. That approval process itself is so onerous and so painful that I hardly, sometimes I just say it's not worth it, let me not even apply. Then when I apply, it will be given the day before I leave. If it's given that late, I can't set up 6 other meetings, because if they don't give it in time, I don't want to renege on meetings I've set up and spoil my relationship. What they should be doing instead is encouraging us to go, supporting us with their partner in the meeting and saying, how can we work closer together? How can we market jointly? That, because, they set the free trade agreement, they set the diplomatic relations, they set the incentive models. All those are done, rightly so, by the union. We can't have every state having its own policy for Estonia. But once they set that, then there's no factory in the Union of India, right? It has to be in some state. There's no office that is being set up in some cloud. It is set up in Delhi or in Tamil Nadu or in Telangana or someplace. So I think the government of India needs to work a lot more closely with all states, and in particular the southern states, because that's where the headcount is. We just heard the statistic, 2/3 the revenue and 50% of the headcount in these areas of technology are in this part. So really we should work much more closer. And I think that's probably the biggest gap we have right now. The center does very little to coordinate and cohesively market India, including us. We are doing okay, and we are benefiting from the wave.
And given that it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity,
Absolutely.
maybe there is a hit or miss. Like if you don't take it now.
No, it's once in a lifetime for 2-3 reasons. The first reason is that this is 20 years of one trade unwinding, right? It will unwind with or without you. It will go to other places. It won't come to you. The second is you will not have this demographic dividend again, right? Let's be very clear. Places like South India are already declining populations. We may not want to say it openly, but the total fertility rate dropped below 2 a decade ago. Even places like UP and Bihar are on trajectory in the next 10-15 years to hit by peak population and start going down. So it's not like you'll perpetually be the human resource capital of the world. You are today. But at some point, Africa will become the biggest source of human beings and not India. So this is a unique opportunity because both these trends are coming together and both have limited lifespan. It's not like today, tomorrow, but it's not like perpetually. It's somewhere between 5 and 15, 20 years, right?
And you spoke about tough competition from Vietnam. What advantages do they have over us, and how can we catch up?
I think the two immediate advantages, I used to run the global business for my old bank, so I traveled to a lot of these countries, and the two immediate advantages that come to mind, one, you don't have to deal with multiple levels of government in Vietnam. Vietnam is one entity.
Oh,
here you have to, if you want to set up in Tamil Nadu, the government of Tamil Nadu, the government of India, and you have to have some approval from them, some approval here, all these things. FIPB was big enough, all those things. The second is, in a way, because they're coming out of a relatively strongman, communist, dictatorial kind of model, the homogeneity of the infrastructure and the kind of platform is actually quite good. India is a much more complex place, like things vary a lot from one place to another. I mean, India's scale is completely different, right? Like the scale of Vietnam is the scale of Tamil Nadu. But the scale of India is, 10x or 15x that. So if somebody wants to contemplate setting up in India, that's a very complex decision. If they want to contemplate setting up in Tamil Nadu, it's a lot easier because they can compare Tamil Nadu and Vietnam. But if they think of India first, as a broad entity, India could mean 20 different things in 20 different places. And so I think that also is a bit of a slowdown in the decision or a retardant to say, do I really want to deal with this complexity? Let me just go straight forward here and finish it off, right?
Sure.
Or Malaysia or Thailand or any of these other,
Sure. So one of the last things that I want to touch before we move on to the audience is in the IT space, in the scope of the IT ministry that you run. I mean, we are seeing that countries like the UAE or Dubai has a AI minister, right? So in the context of this changing world, what is the relevance of an IT ministry? I understand that IT ministries came around the Y2K era, about 25 years ago, when IT was like where AI and all these new technologies are today. And then we still have a separate ministry for IT, which is separate from industries in many states. Is it time to rethink that? If yes, what should it be like? If no, why? Yeah, I would like
That's
to
a
get
very
your thoughts.
touchy question because there's a conflict of interest. But I'll just tell you, of course we need to rethink it, but we already have huge disparity today. For example, in Delhi, we have two different ministries roughly in the same field. One is MeitY, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, and one is Ministry of Telecommunications. This is back from the day when landlines was the basis as opposed to now all cell phone towers, VoIP and everything. So the ministries there itself, it's hard to tell what should be what. Then you come to the states, and I don't want to talk about northern states, but you come to southern states. Here in Telangana, the ministry is called Electronics, Communication and Information Technology. And since the inception of Telangana, both in the previous government and in this government, it's run by the same minister who runs industries as well as other things. That's one model. Then you go to Andhra, and it's also, because it was the parent state, it also has Electronics, Communications, Information Technology. And it's run by a minister who runs, among other things, the human resources management and stuff, Mr. Nara Lokesh. You come to Kerala, it's called Electronics and Information Technology, no communications, and it's run by the chief minister, integrated with many other portfolios. You go to Karnataka, the ministry is called Electronics, Information Technology, Biotechnology, and Science and Technology, and is run by a very senior minister who also happens to run rural development and other things. In Tamil Nadu, we have a Ministry of Information Technology that really should be called the Ministry of Residual Subjects. Because in industries, we have promotion of information technology, all the tidal parks, which are announced as information technology schemes, but run under the Industries Ministry. We have electronics is completely away from information technology. Many of the startup missions are also partly in information technology, partly in the MSME sector and all. So the structure of the departments have been designed ad hoc or accidentally or by that date's twist of terms in late 90s, early 2000s across all these states. And so I think there's time for a fundamental rethink in the age of AI, but also in the age of integrated technology inside. I mean, it's hard to think of industry without technology today, right? Yeah. Like if you really think about it, there's no industry that runs without a lot of embedded information technology. And on the other hand, the notion of startup and AI and connectivity and IoT and all that is a completely different kind of approach to innovation and advancement than networks and Wi-Fi and things like that, right? So I don't know. I think it's time, but already we have quite a wide disparity, and I have, as I say, some residual bits of things not looked after by others. So we're still trying to figure out what we should do.
Yeah, and also in the age of great opportunity for India, I think some of these things need to be. Definitely. Yeah. And also with this, I think worldwide, this is also the era of digital technologies and all the internet and social media and etc., right? Which is also impacting the social life of human beings, right? I mean, we have more stress, early heart attacks and etc., also induced by the digital.
No, that's one aspect, and I think both events, both yesterday and today, somebody has approached me, and I was recently in Delhi a few days back for something else. The people who come talk to me first are the online gaming and the AVGC community, right? Like there's a whole industry there creating virtual everything, virtual worlds, virtual games, online, whatever, shared participation games, whatever. So I think we have not really thought about all these things that clearly, and there's going to be a whole regulatory aspect and a whole kind of, and then of course basic things like cybersecurity, right? Most of us, in my understanding, most of us have not really put too much effort, like around the world. I'm not saying Tamil Nadu, I'm not saying South India, I'm not saying India. I think the single place where there's going to be guaranteed employment for the next 10 years, how many ever people come to this field is cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
Millions and millions and millions of jobs are going to be created and go unfilled if people don't move there. So,
yeah, that digital policy, like as the country, we are creating these digital-related policies only now.
And some of these have to be set at the national level because we can't have like cybersecurity policies or kind of legal variations between states to some extent. Like gambling, we can because it's a state subject. But the notion of what constitutes gambling or what doesn't cannot really vary between states. There has to be one constitution, one law, one interpretation of what is a game of chance or game of skill. I say that from my days on the GST Council, GOM, on how to tax these things. This is a very complicated subject, but it has to have a national solution. I can't have, I can't arbitrage companies setting up in Telangana or Karnataka based on whose law is more conducive to them.
Yeah. And given that our cultures are so different in each the states, is there opportunity for any of these digital policies around well-being? Like how much should a child be, teenager be allowed? What kind of content be allowed? Is there a scope for state policies around that? I mean, given that we have IT ministries everywhere and culturally we are so different, I mean, what restrictions should we have? What things should we allow? Because all this is new to the whole world, like you mentioned. Is it time to think through those things, or?
I don't know. I'm a bit nervous because my understanding of government is not particularly good at enforcing nuanced things. It's barely adequate at enforcing black and white things. So I'm not sure that I mean, setting up a policy would be extremely complicated thing. I'm not 100% certain that different states would have different policies because we'd all like to protect our youth at the same level, I think, from America to China to Tamil Nadu to Karnataka or to Bihar. But at some other level, I'm more worried about, if there's legislation or regulation that you cannot enforce or audit or validate compliance, then is it worth doing at all? Because, it's just... It's worse than doing nothing is to put something out there and then have it continuously violated, in my view.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. At this point, we can take audience questions. If you can raise your hand, the mic will be sent. Yeah, go ahead.
Quite unfair of me to ask the question before anybody else does, but nonetheless I will. From the government's perspective, do you believe that when policy making is what you indulge in, privacy of users of technology matters? Is that a priority in policy framing? Also, is that something you see as important to people? Do people really care about privacy in the age of technology?
I hope so. I think some of these are profound constitutional questions, so I don't think it's that easy to have. It's either required or easy to have privacy laws that will be varying from state to state. I think some of this we have to have a national law and the one interpretation of that law within or without the Constitution by the Supreme Court. I don't think we can say we have a different standard for privacy. Like even the European Union you take, though there are many member states, they have one European Union privacy policy. It may differ from the United States, but they have one. And so I think in the US they do have a little bit of variation in states about what information can be tracked by cookies and so forth. But I think it's a bit easier for them to enforce because a lot of the big information technology companies are operating out of the United States, or a lot of social media and network and game companies. Here I'm not sure how we would enforce it, but I think it's extremely important. Extremely important first and foremost to ensure the state is not surveilling people. And then, of course, to ensure that companies are not exploiting. So far, we have not had that big a problem because not enough of us are online and not enough of our lives are online for it to be a real problem. It's a problem, and it's more of a problem for some than others, but it's kind of a richer people, better access to technology, people's problems so far. But at some point, it's going to become everybody's problem. But then at that level is as profound a problem as is your Aadhaar number safe. So I think, these are policies that will have to be started at a national debate first, and then maybe there can be variations in the states.
Sure. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rizwan. I'm a software engineer. So earlier you had mentioned that one of the main problems with our democratic system is the lack of accountability because people change every 5 years. So I was wondering what your opinion on different other forms of governance like constitutional monarchy or an aristocracy.
No.
Where people are
No. I'm not advocating anything. I'm just saying that the Constitution was designed where a lot of things are supposed to be held accountable. There's a CAG, there's an internal audit in the government. There's supposed to be some consequence if you violate the rules or the norms or you're corrupt. There are DVAC, there's a CBI. The CBI was not set up to do political persecution. It was set up to do investigation of government servant corruption. That was the original intent, just like the Department of Vigilance and Anti-Corruption in Tamil Nadu. So all these entities have become either dysfunctional in their original intent or misdirected in their practical usage, or in many cases, forget all that. Even the Auditor General's reports, the annual kind of CAG, PAG reports, there are no consequences for it anymore. Nobody cares. Violation after violation is found. Thousands of paragraphs get written. I served on the Public Accounts Committee for 5 years as an opposition member, and then for a couple of years as an ex officio member when I was finance minister. And it's ridiculous how many violations come and how little consequence there is for it. So when I was finance minister, I was actually trying to beef that up. I was greatly focused on that. I set up a committee for audit reforms. I set up a special office of Director General of Audit, head of department. I gathered all the internal audit departments away from their respective functional lines so that their arm's length, brought them into the Director General of Audit, got all these people trained, changed the recruiting process so that we weren't just taking former clerks and junior assistants and over time promoting them to be auditors. Insist on rotation of auditors so that if you're sitting in audit in Salem, you have to actually audit the books in Madurai so that an excess can't form. I was trying to bring back accountability into this. I think it's doable. I think the fact is that most people either don't have the political will or they don't have enough understanding of how to actually build a system as the Constitution says it should be. It's not like rocket science. We're not doing this for the first time. Maybe the implementation of it can be better, more driven by technology, more adapted to the scale of government today, which is many-fold what it was at the date of the Constitution. But the Constitution has built-in checks and balances and accountability. It's just not being exercised or followed or implemented. That's the problem. I'm a lifelong believer in democracy. I'm not looking for any other form of government. Yeah.
Hello sir, my name is Arvind. I have a question. So the discussion is about making India a global brand. My question is, should federalism be at the heart of making India a global brand? Like for example, we have geographical indication for products of each state. Why can't we say product of Tamil Nadu made in India or product of Telangana made in India? That would empower the states in the global.
I don't have any disagreement. In fact, I would say that neither can we succeed as well without the support of the Government of India, the Ministry of External Affairs, the Ministry of Commerce, the missions. Nor can they achieve the outcome without the states being actively involved in the promotion, in the execution. So it behooves all of us to work much more closely together. And we'll get a definite multiplier effect if we did it together. Right now, we're operating almost kind of independently, almost orthogonally to each other. That's very sad, actually.
My name is Abhiram. Can you name one policy or one law all South Indian states should adopt? One policy.
In IT or broadly? No, in information technology or broadly, I'm saying?
Anything. Since we are having Dakshin Dialogues, so if you could take away one policy or one law, one common question.
Well, we brought in, and I'll give you 2 or 3 examples because that's a very broad field, but we brought in some and some I couldn't
then
bring
the
in.
most important one should be fine.
I don't know, most important, right? I wasn't the law minister, but I'll say we brought in transparency. I'll give you an easy one. We changed the Transparency in Tenders Act to say that if you're buying goods or services from a startup that is innovative enough, then up to 50 lakhs of purchase you can buy without a tender, so that you can encourage the startup, you can validate their business model, and basically give them the credibility to go to market. And in fact, at that point, I was suggesting the government should actually take equity in them as well. So, we can help that way. So that was easy. I wanted to bring a regulation of Trust Act for various reasons, including homogenizing the treatment of all religious trusts, because there's this constant complaint that the king's temples are nationalized, but the Waqf and the churches are not. It's a long story, but anyway, there are many things we could do that are core legislations, because a lot of our legislative kind of legacy or history is from British era regulations that have not been changed. Like they were almost copied over into the Constituent Assembly had very little time. So they were not actually going to the level of minute legislation. So a lot of the laws are still left over from 150, 200 years back. We can do a lot better legislation, actually, a lot of things.
I think the gentleman there has a question.
Meanwhile, he gets the mic.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Mohammed Afroz. And rightly says, I'm a technologist and a student of law. So what you said, I totally agree. We have British era laws still existing, and although there has been some recent changes, there's a huge that needs to be done in that space. Getting to my question, I believe we recently had attended Tamil Nadu's vision for emerging and deep tech innovation in IT and TNT in Chennai. So, as it opened last year sometime, right? And it was a huge step forward in helping startups. Just like we have T-Hub here, and like the host mentioned, K-Start in Karnataka, IT&T was opened in Chennai. So what are the upcoming plans for further collaborations between, and like Mr. Reddy said, we need collaboration between the academia, industries to be on the same page. So my question is, what are the upcoming plans by Ministry of Tamil Nadu, IT and Digital Services, for further collaborations between academia, startups, and global tech firms to drive innovation?
Sure.
Second question, if you allow. We've had recent suicides, as we all know, in IT. Well, our finance minister sadly said things which were very untoward and saddening. Putting it to spirituality and whatnot. So, what is your take on that? Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say we're collaborating all the time. When I took over this ministry, I brought a whole delegation up to Hyderabad, and my friend PTR hosted us. We went and saw T-Hub, T-Works, all the V-Hub, all the different aspects of it, the task. And some of it we had, some of it replicated, some of it they learned from us. I think we've signed an agreement now between IT&T and either T-Hub or V-Hub. So we can collaborate many ways, state to state. Inside, I run something called the ICT Academy, which is the training academy, has 1,750 colleges around the country. Though it's a Tamil Nadu company, it's got offices in 10 states. We try to bring academia and the curriculum setters and the placement officers of universities together to better shape the courses and the final year, to help them more suited to the job market. So there's a lot we can do. We've announced research parks where companies set up inside the university campuses so that they are mutually benefiting each other. IT&T, in fact, is set up inside Anna University. There's also Anna University incubator. So there are many, many efforts at collaboration. I would say we could probably streamline them better and integrate them all. We have like one it's a portal, I forget what it's called, where we put all the different labs and all the different facilities in one place. So startups can go and see what all facilities are available in which university, what testing machines, what labs, stuff like that. It's work in progress. We can do a lot more about it. I mean, listen, I don't want to comment on other people's kind of statements. It's not the place for politics, but I hope the work culture is not so stressful that. Well, I mean, it's around the world. It's not a. What can I say? I remember my days in investment banking, and I know a lot of people in the big four accounting and consulting firms and all that. When you're young, there's a heavy workload. Most firms are realizing that it's detrimental. A lot of firms have very high attrition ratios in those years of the early years of young people coming into the program. I mean, there are very clear laws that you shouldn't be having people working 80, 100-hour weeks and all that. Exceptions happen. They shouldn't. The government should enforce the law. Companies should be thoughtful in their own long-term interests. I hope that it's a rare occurrence that will be an instance for soul searching, and we won't see too many problems like that going forward. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll take a last question from there. Yeah.
Sir, you were hinting at some discrimination by the north to the south, with the south. I agree that after independence there was this license Raj, and southerners were denied the rightful industry. But I don't think so it applies today. How can you buttress
I'm
your
not sure I
argument?
was hinting at any discrimination. I just said because the bulk of the vote bank for the MP who controls parliament and the bulk of the population is there, the perception of India is often that of North India, and maybe the fact that South India is quite diverse is sometimes lost in the bigger picture. That's all. If there is any, I won't call it discrimination, if there is any systematic differentiation, it is that generally in the South, we pay in a lot more taxes and we get back a lot less money. And in the North, much of our money is going there. It's okay. I don't have a problem with it. That's what all rich places are supposed to do inside one country for poor places. What I have a problem with, which I keep saying again and again, at least for the last 25 years, these transfers have not done what they're supposed to do. If you take money from the better off and give it to the less well off, it's intended to bring them closer to equality. It's intended to narrow the gap. 25 years of ever increasing transfers have led not to closing the gap, not to stabilizing the gap, not just to a widening gap, but to an accelerating widening of the gap. So there's some random noise, the fake news machine is disgusting, but it's efficient. And so around the end of December, they put out something saying, UP has beaten Tamil Nadu as the second biggest economy in India. What a great deal. It is profound stupidity. So I didn't do anything for 2-3 months. And then I went and got the data because it started coming back second cycle. And the facts I said were, UP's population is like 200 and something million. Tamil Nadu's population is 75 something million. If UP is not a bigger economy than Tamil Nadu, it is a crying shame. It means the inequality is that they are 1/3 as well off as us, number one. Number two, from independence till 2014, UP was a bigger economy than Tamil Nadu. Because there were only 40% or 45% of us. Now they've dropped to 32% of us in the last 10 years. Third, when UP was 102, 103% of us in, total, not per capita I'm saying gone from 42% to 30% to 32% of us. But when the gross economy was greater than ours and was 100 and something percent, the devolution of money from Delhi was for 1 rupee they got slightly less than 3 rupees. In 10 years, that has changed to if we get 1 rupee, they get more than 4 rupees. 1 lakh crore extra rupees are given relative to the trend line in 2024 compared to 2014. And yet, the economy has gone from 103% down to 93%. So my question is, what is happening with all this money? What is the point of making transfers if they keep getting worse and worse? They should be getting better. What is happening? That's the only question I'm asking. I'm not saying don't take the money. I say, what happens once you take the money? Why is it failing to deliver any result over there? I have an answer. It is because they're not putting it into the 2 or 3 things that basically matter. They're not putting it into inclusion of everybody into the system of nutrition and education. They're not insisting that 100% enrollment has to happen first in primary school, then in secondary school, then. So if you don't do those things, how much ever money you put into a place, if you're not building the platform, it's like, throwing it down a well. So that's what's happening.
And where's the money going there?
It's going to, just like it is in many places, they accuse us of having a freebie culture. If the money is going to the UP and is not showing up in results, where can it be going? It is going into disbursements, right? That's where it's going.
Sure, I specifically asked that question because I just wanted you to educate us on the benefits of the, so-called freebie and welfare culture. That's my last question, and you...
No, listen,
yeah.
At the political level, it is kind of perverse, right? If I do it, I call it investment. If you do it, I call it freebie. It's idiotic. Everybody gives something for free or subsidized everywhere. At a policy level, we can have a nuanced debate. Some things are clearly value-adding. If I give free food in schools, if I give, cycles to children to get to school so they don't have to wait for a bus, if I give insurance against health problems, if I give support for marriages, there are some things that are clearly justifiable, some have greater impact. All of them, how you run the program matters a lot. If you run it efficiently and with directed and targeted, it makes a much bigger impact than if you don't. And then there are grotesquely bad freebies like we had a 50% subsidy on buying a scooter scheme. How does that make any sense? I'm running a public transportation system where I'm not able to get enough riders. I have 2.9 crore two-wheelers registered in Tamil Nadu for only 2.3 crore ration cards. It's a universal ration card state. That means I already have more than one two-wheeler per family. Why am I giving subsidy for two ways? Like beyond idiocy. So there are good, bad and ugly schemes. And how you implement them matters a lot. But everybody does something like it, right? Like last word, I saw this young kid in a debate. And again, I don't want to be political, but I want to tell you how this is a double-edged sword, right? There's a young kid, like 13, 14-year-old kid, and there's a pracharak of a party. He comes to him and he says, the PM has given 800 million people, 80 crore, 80 crore people are getting free rice. And this guy says, what are you talking about? He says, 80 crore people are free rice. He says, okay, 80 crore people free rice, right? So you agree there are 80 crore people who are so poor they need free rice from you, right? Right? So I'm saying this is like, the politics is just random noise like any other thing. If you're thoughtful people, you say, what are you giving it for? Is it an investment in the future? Is it an insurance program? Is it just buying votes today? There can be a whole range of programs which have better or less justifiable policy basis, and then the execution can be phenomenally good or it can be problematic. Like we used to have a free cow and goat scheme under the old regime. The goat scheme worked out relatively well. The cow scheme ran into all kinds of problems because when you give somebody a cow, where is the cow coming from? If you're buying cows from within the state, you're not increasing the total population of cows. So you're basically driving up the price of cows by getting the government into the buying side without no change in the supply. So then they decided, no, we won't get the cow from here, we'll get it from all the neighboring states. Now you're going and upsetting the markets in the neighboring states. Then you say, how will you go and buy a cow? They say, no, we have to take the beneficiary with us to the market in Andhra Pradesh, and then they will decide if the cow is good enough. How will you decide if it's good enough? We'll wait to see how much it milks on average for 3 days. Which market will they sell a cow after letting you milk it for 3 days? It's just stupidity, right? So the scheme was simply unimplementable and it failed, right? So.